On October 3, 1974, the bodies of 16-year-old Donald Barton and 18-year-old Peter Zito were discovered at the Oak Hills Recreational Center in Aloha by a newspaper delivery driver in the early hours of the morning. The residents of the peaceful neighborhood were left shaken and confused, struggling to understand the act of brutality that had occurred on their streets. The shock waves of the senseless crime reverberated throughout the city, and for years detectives were baffled as to who the culprit behind this act could be. Who could have killed these innocent teenage boys? What could be the reason behind this gruesome murder? Today, we'll delve into a case that remained unsolved for 48 long years until justice was finally served in 2022. Today, our story takes us to Aloha, an unincorporated community nestled between Beaverton and Hillsboro in Oregon. Despite being unincorporated, Aloha offers all the conveniences of a bustling city, including a post office, library, and schools. Golf enthusiasts can tee off at the prestigious Reserve Vineyards and Golf Club, known for its breathtaking views and top-notch facilities. Meanwhile, beer aficionados can head to the 649 Tap House and Bottle Shop to try out new brews from its selection of 20 taps of craft beer and kombucha. For gamers, Rainy Day Games offers a variety of children's games, strategy games, and disc golf products. But it was here in this sleepy community that a senseless act of violence took place in 1974. Donald Barton was born in 1959 in Aloha, an unincorporated community in Oregon. His mother's name was Irene Barton. He went to Aloha High School and used to live with his family. Barton was a great hockey player and used to play for his high school. Barton also used to work at bustling Black Angus restaurant part-time, and at night he worked at recreational center. Peter Zito was born in 1957 in Aloha. He was a student of Aloha High School. Zito too had an interest in ice hockey and used to practice it whenever he had time. Zito also used to work at the recreational center at night with Barton. Not much is known about his personal history, but an interview with his elder sister, Barbara Zito, sheds light on his personal life. According to those who knew him best, he used to cherish the simple joys of life. Zito was a gentle boy who had a deep affection for his 1956 Oldsmobile and the 4 feline members of his family. Though he had dropped out of Aloha High School and taken up a job as a dishwasher, he held on to aspirations of obtaining his diploma through Portland Community College. It's a reminder that, even in tragedy, there are stories of ordinary people with dreams and passions that deserve to be remembered. On the quiet evening of October 3, 1974, 2 boys, Donald Barton, who was 16 at the time, and Peter Zito Jr., who was 18, were working on Zito's 1956 Oldsmobile car at 2 a.m. in the Oak Hills Recreation Center parking lot. They had no idea that it would be their last night on Earth. As they tinkered with the engine of the car, an unknown assailant approached them and murdered them in cold blood by shooting them both. What should have been a routine night turned into a nightmare for the families and loved ones of these teenagers. The next morning, the horror was discovered by an Oregonian newspaper delivery driver who stumbled upon the crime scene. The bodies of the 2 boys lay lifeless, almost as if time had stood still. The senseless violence had robbed them of their youth, their dreams, and their future. The newspaper delivery driver, with shaking hands, called the police and reported what he had seen at the crime scene. Within minutes, sirens were blaring as detectives and forensic investigators arrived. The gruesome sight left the investigators reeling with shock and disbelief. But without wasting any time, they started the inspection of the crime scene carefully, and with a closer inspection, it was clear that Donald Barton had been working on the 1956 Oldsmobile in the parking lot under the hood of a car when he was ruthlessly shot in the back of his head. His body was found slumped over the open hood of the car, as if he had been taken by surprise while working on the engine. Next to the Oldsmobile lay the body of Peter Zito Jr., who likely got out from the back seat of the car to see what had happened to Donald and was shot in the forehead. He had been found lying on the ground next to the driver's door. The proximity of the 2 bodies suggested that the killer had struck without warning and that the victims had been unable to defend themselves against the attacker. After gathering all the information from the crime scene, the investigators then interviewed anyone who had been near the recreation center on the night of the murders. They followed up on every possible lead, no matter how insignificant it might have seemed. They asked everyone who lived nearby if there were any screams that they heard or any abnormal activity that they encountered on the night of the murder. The investigators worked tirelessly to gather any leads that could help them solve the case. They found that the teenage boys were shot in the head with a .22 caliber gun. As their investigation proceeded, they learned that Barton had a rivalry with a 17-year-old co-worker named Chris at the bustling Black Angus restaurant in Hillsborough. Nobody quite knew what the root of their feud was, but it was evident that there was tension in the air between the two of them. Despite Chris being the prime suspect in the minds of many, the police had to move carefully in their investigation because they knew they could not risk making any mistakes. Investigators thought Chris had a motive for the murder, but without any concrete evidence, they decided to pursue another suspect. During the investigation of the Oak Hill murders, a man came forward and informed the investigators that he had witnessed an assault on Joseph Amir Wilson at the recreation center on the night of the murder. Investigators believed that Wilson could have mistaken the boys for someone else and shot Zito and Barton in retaliation for the assault. The case of the Oak Hills double murder took a puzzling turn when Joseph Amir Wilson, who was 18 years old and also a student of Aloha High School, was arrested and charged with the brutal killings of Donald Barton and Peter Zito Jr. As investigators delved deeper into the case, they stumbled upon a cache of weapons and knives at the home of Wilson. More than 100 knives and an array of guns were found during a search of his residence. Among the weapons was a loaded .38 caliber gun hidden under Wilson's pillow. When investigators questioned him about the weapons, Wilson explained that they belonged to his late father. While his explanation was being investigated, all the guns were sent for testing, and it was revealed that none of the guns were a match for the one used in the brutal murders of Zito and Barton. The investigation continued as they tried to piece together the mystery of was responsible for the heinous crime. While Wilson vehemently denied any involvement in the crime, the investigators were not ready to release him and continued their investigation. The more investigators delved into the case, the more they began to question whether Wilson was truly guilty. As the case proceeded, Wilson's defense team presented a compelling argument that he was not responsible for the deaths of Barton and Zito Jr. The prosecution's case was built on circumstantial evidence and the fact that there was no direct proof linking Wilson to the crime. Despite the doubts and the lingering questions, Wilson was eventually released. Many people in the community were left with a sense of unease, wondering if the killer was still out there, walking amongst them. Initially, investigators had suspected Chris due to his tension with Barton at their workplace, bustling Black Angus restaurant in Hillsborough, but didn't interrogate him as he was under 18. They focused on Wilson, another suspect, but when he was found innocent, this brought their attention back to Chris. This time, they investigated Chris further. When Chris was arrested for theft, the investigators found a .22 caliber gun in his car, sparking new hope for a break in the case. The gun was then sent for testing to see if it was the same gun used in the murder of the two boys. Despite the promising lead, the gun could not be matched to the bullets at the crime scene, once again leaving investigators at a dead end. As the months turned into years, the case went cold and the families of the victims were left with no answers and no justice. The case remained unsolved, leaving everyone in the doubt of the truth about what happened on that fateful night and if it would ever come to light. The Washington County Sheriff's Office was determined to close this cold case and decided to reopen the investigation in 2022 and rerun ballistics of the .22 caliber gun that had been used to shoot the two innocent teenage boys, Barton and Zito. The detectives had suspected Chris back then, but they couldn't match the gun found in his possession to the murder scene. However, with advances in forensic technology with congruent matching cells technology, they finally confirmed that the same gun was used to commit both murders, and that it had a match in the system that had been used to carry out another murder in 1979. When police looked into the owner of who this gun was, they were shocked at the identity of the owner. It was none other than Chris, the teenager who police had suspected all those years ago. Investigators now took an in-depth look into where Chris was now to see what he had done in the years following the murders. Mark Allen Chris, finally identified as the culprit for the double murder case, was 65 years old now and was living in Aloha, the small community that was located 12 miles west of Portland. The story of the .22 caliber gun used during the murder of Donald Barton and Peter Zito Jr. took a dark turn when it was discovered that it had been used in another gruesome killing. In 1974, when Chris was released by the investigators as no match was found from the ballistics of the gun was returned to him, and he then carried it with him to the Fort Lewis United States Army base in Washington. It was there that Chris used the same weapon to murder his commanding officer, Sergeant Jacob Kim Brown, on October 8, 1979, almost 5 years to the date that Barton and Zito were killed. Chris shot his boss in the head 5 times over a petty argument, according to police reports. The cadet had damaged Brown's car, and instead of paying for repairs, he chose to take his life when they got into an argument. Was sentenced to 35 years in jail for the murder of Sergeant Brown. However, fate had a different plan for him. He was released after just 12 years on parole in 1988, a decision that did not sit well with the family of his victim. But this time in 2022, when the case reopened, he was finally out of luck, and when the match was found, it was announced that this was the same .22 caliber gun that was used in 1974 to kill Zito and Barton at the recreational center. Chris, who had been living in Aloha, a small community located 12 miles west of Portland, was arrested on November 2, 2022 and charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The news of his arrest sent shockwaves throughout the town, and people could not believe that justice had finally been served after all these years. The arrest of Chris and the confirmation of the gun match marked a historic moment, with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives describing it as the oldest known match nationwide that they have ever confirmed. It was a long-awaited moment for the families of Donald Barton and Peter Zito Jr., who had waited for almost 5 decades for justice to be served. The reopening of this case and the arrest of the suspect was a testament to the hard work and dedication of the detectives who had never given up on bringing the killer to justice. It also gave hope to other families of victims of cold cases that justice may still be possible no matter how long it takes. The families of the victims have been waiting for this moment for decades, and their unwavering devotion to finding justice for their loved ones has finally paid off. The sheriff's office wanted to recognize their commitment and the courage it took to keep fighting for so many years. However, in their quest for justice, the sheriff's office inadvertently wronged an innocent man. Joseph Amir Wilson was arrested and charged for the murders just hours after they happened. But it was clear he was innocent. The charges against him were dropped, but the damage had been done. The sheriff's office formally apologized to any relatives of Wilson for this injustice in hopes that someday they can make a personal, direct apology. The case was a team effort, with multiple agencies working together to bring closure to the families and justice for the victims. The Oregon State Crime Lab, the Pierce County Sheriff's Department, the ATF, and the CID all played a crucial role in solving this case. The sheriff's office hopes that the families of the victim can find peace now that the killer has been brought to justice. The pain of losing a loved one never truly goes away, but knowing that the person responsible has been held accountable can provide some solace. In the news conference, Sheriff Pat Garrett stepped up to the podium, his eyes scanning the room until they fell on the families of the victims. His heart went out to them, knowing that their pain had been a constant companion for over 48 years. I want to acknowledge the loss of your loved ones many years ago and what you've had to endure waiting for today, he said, his voice firm yet sympathetic. One of the family members, Peter Zito's sister, Barbara Zito, couldn't help but remember her brother as the happy-go-lucky kid he was before his life was tragically cut short. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes as she listened to the sheriff's words. He was just a happy kid, and it was terrible when I heard he was gone, she whispered to herself. The news of Chris's arrest brought a sense of relief, but also a flood of questions. The families of the victim left the news conference with mixed emotions, grateful for the long-awaited justice, but also aware that the pain of losing their loved ones would never fully go away. The journey to closure was a long and difficult one, but they could finally take comfort in knowing that the killer was behind bars. It is chilling to think that the case of Donald Barton and Peter Zito remained unsolved for over 48 years. But thanks to the dedication and persistence of law enforcement and forensic investigators, justice was finally served. It is a reminder that no matter how long it takes, the truth will always come to light. On June 26, 2001, just a day before her birthday, a 52-year-old Caucasian woman, Karen Moore, left her residence in Davie, Florida at 7 p.m. and would never return home. The next day, her 8-year-old daughter Christina would come home from summer camp for her mother's birthday, but her mother would not be there to pick her up. Where could Karen have gone? Was there any foul play involved? Would she ever come back? These were questions that troubled Christina for 22 long years, until now. Today, we are looking at the 22-year-old cold case solved in 2023 by the depths of history. Davie, a homey suburban town in the Broward County of Florida, offers the comfort of a close-knit community and the vibrancy of Western-themed attractions. The evergreen sunshine, warm climate, and the proximity to beaches are attraction points for tourists as well as residents. It is famous for housing college students as Davie is the hub of multiple university campuses. Home to over 110,000 people, Davie provides abundant recreational activities, quality education, and neighborly living situations. And it is here in Davie that our case begins today. Thomas Stewart Moore and Olga Charlotte Moore were blessed with a baby girl on June 27, 1948. They named her Karen Elizabeth Moore. She also had a sister named Pam. As she grew up, Karen enjoyed cooking, hiking, sailing, and playing the piano. Karen had a keen interest in traveling since her childhood. Nobody would have predicted that she would travel away one day and never come back. She completed her Associates of Art degree in 1968 and graduated as a Bachelor of Science majoring in nursing in 1979. In 2001, at the age of 53, Karen Elizabeth Moore was going through a divorce with her husband. She had a restraining order against him. They had an 8-year-old daughter together named Christina, who Karen got full custody of. Before she went missing, Karen was employed as a nurse at the Edgepoint Estates retirement community in Boca Raton. But even though she worked full-time, she never compromised on providing a quality childhood for Christy. She made sure to give Christina the best years of her life. Christina too remembers Karen as a dedicated mother. Despite her job as a nurse, Karen found time to take Christina to the zoo and do other activities with her, simply to spend quality time together. She wanted to ensure a happy and healthy childhood for her daughter. But soon, the happy picture of this family would turn into a sad story filled with a myriad of questions. June 27, 2001 was Karen's 53rd birthday. Came back home from her Girl Scout camp to celebrate with her mother, but Karen never came to pick her up. The first suspicion that something was wrong arose when Karen didn't show up. Karen was a nurse, so it was possible that she might have been busy at work. But Karen was always available for her daughter, and if she had work, she would have sent someone else to receive Christina. The fact that no one was there was very strange. As the day passed by, the story got even more mysterious. The previous day, on June 26th, around 6:30 in the evening, Karen had paid her neighbor's son for mowing her lawn. That was the last time someone had seen her. She had then taken her white 1999 Saturn and left the house around 7 p.m. No one had any idea why she had left the house or where she could have gone. When she didn't return home, a police complaint was filed by Karen's sister Pam Kleiss. Pam revealed that Karen had called her estranged husband to pick up Christina before leaving for work in the morning the day she disappeared. Later, she had exchanged a brief interaction with her neighbor's son and then left the house. What happened after these incidents is anyone's guess. She was supposed to work the next day. Keith Krydall was the executive director of the retirement home Edgepoint Estates where Karen worked as a nurse. He mentioned that Karen had a punctual and responsible working history of 8 years. Karen was so sincere about her work that she would have informed the establishment in case of any urgent endeavor she had. Everyone knew that Christina meant everything to her. There was no doubt that Karen didn't leave voluntarily. Now, was this just a distressing accident, or was something else at play here? With rising suspicions and no real leads, the police had limited resources to find Karen Moore. The first step was to track her vehicle. At the time of her bizarre disappearance, Karen was driving a white 1999 Saturn 4-door with the license plate Duthu. Her car also had an Indiana State University decal on the back. This information was distributed to the public with every possible detail. James Frankies, a detective at the Davie Police Department, received a tip from a woman saying she had seen the same car in South Miami-Dade County, but the information could not be verified or backed by any other witnesses. In a frantic effort to take the case forward, the police released a missing poster detailing Karen's physical appearance. The posters read that she had brown eyes, brown hair, and prescription glasses. Her height was listed as 5 feet 4 inches. With no success so far, the police were struggling for leads to find the whereabouts of Karen. The initial inspection of her house was enough of an indicator to anticipate bad news. All her clothing, luggage, and even her cell phone were found at home. A closer look at her house made it evident that there were no signs of forced entry or foul play. The detective suspected that Karen must have left the house voluntarily. However, what caused her to leave was still unclear. Frankies informed the public that the police were looking into the financial and telephone records of Karen Moore. The possibility of theft or robbery was immediately shunned when her bank account and credit card showed no activity. This also meant that Karen was in a bad state. After all, with all her necessary items still at home, she would have required cash to sustain herself. Her relatives requested the police department to search for Karen with a helicopter. But with no knowledge of the direction that Karen could have driven in, the police couldn't proceed further. The Moore family and the entire police department released missing person posters with rewards, but Karen had completely vanished without any trace. Days turned into months and months turned into years, and Karen's family were left waiting for her to come home. Years upon years went by, but Karen did not return. Her daughter, Christina, got married and had children of her own. But there was still no information about what had happened to Karen that day. January 6, 2023 was the day when Brian Lockhart, a scuba diver and the owner of the YouTube channel Depths of History, accompanied Michael Rodriguez and Mike Sullivan, heading the Sunshine State sonar team in searching the local water bodies in Broward County. With the help of advanced sonar technology, they found a car in a retention pond in Davie. When Michael noticed his underwater sonar system lighting up, the entire team was quick to identify that they had hit the wheels of a car in the water. It took them about 15 minutes to finally find the car. When Britton dove to examine it, he found an open trunk and a license plate under 3 feet of muck. They knew they had found something substantial, but they were not sure about its details and whether it was related to any old cases. Britton quickly rushed to contact the Davie Police Department. Even 22 years after Karen's strange disappearance, Davie police hadn't forgotten about her. When they arrived at the scene the next day, they had to send the divers back into the water. The car was pulled out of the water and was sent for further inspection. The car matched the description of the vehicle Karen was driving when she disappeared. The license plate of Karen's car was found covered in dirt. It was a huge discovery in this 22-year-old case. The pieces were finally falling in place. They found 2 bones inside the car, which later confirmed that Karen Moore had been inside the car when it entered the lake. Finally, they found out what had happened to Karen Moore. Lockhart and Rodriguez could not talk about the specifics of the case, even when the entire search mission was telecasted live on YouTube. The police suspected foul play and prevented the search teams and even the Moore family from giving interviews about the case. Though the details concerning what's, hows, and whys are still under investigation. A daughter finally got closure about her mother's fate after 22 years. After Karen mysteriously disappeared, Christina was left in the care of her relatives. The comfort and closeness that she felt with her mother could never be substituted. She faced constant ups and downs in her early years. She even ended up in foster care for a time. In times like these, she would miss her mother and pray that she would be found or return home to her. She said, "Every life moment that every little girl hopes and dreams for, to have their mother with them. My own birthdays when I got engaged and married. Now I have 2 kids. They don't get to know their grandmother." Undoubtedly, Christina Barber was very close to her mother. Even after all these years, she took to TikTok in 2021, mentioning how she would have liked a little more time with her mother. After 22 long years, Christina finally got some information about her mother. Christina could not get all the answers that had bothered her for years, but she showed her gratitude to police and search teams as she finally got to bring Karen back home and lay her to rest in peace. A further probe into the case of Karen Moore's disappearance is active and ongoing. Davie police sent an email to Fox News Digital stating that they had a meeting with the detectives, but they could not comment on the case as it might hinder the possible outcome of the investigation. After the discovery of her remains in the pond, the next set of urgent questions appeared. How did Karen end up in the pond? If the police's suspicions are right, what was the motive behind this crime? Who was responsible for the 22 years of agony for Christina and the whole Moore family? Now that Karen has returned home after 22 years, all hope is not lost in her case. The dedication of the police department and the technological advancement in sonar systems resulted in a partial success. The answers may seem blurry right now, but justice for Karen may be just around the corner. If anyone out there knows anything, do not hesitate to come forward, as your information could be invaluable to unmask a decades-old mystery. Did Karen die because of an accident, or was it something more sinister? On February 27, 2011, a murder took place in Hyannis, a village that is located on the southern coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. 31-year-old Todd Lampley was shot dead through the window of his room. Some shocking evidence that was found at the crime scene connected some fictional stories to the murder. But despite this confusing evidence, it took 12 years to reveal the truth. Behind Todd's murder, nestled on the southern coast of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, is Hyannis, a picturesque city. It is a charming gem that sparkles with history, natural beauty, and endless activities. The village is surrounded by the serene waters of the Nantucket Sound, which provides stunning views of the sunset and plenty of opportunities for water sports enthusiasts. The quaint main street of Hyannis is dotted with colorful boutiques, art galleries, and restaurants that offer mouth-watering local seafood. For history buffs, the John F. Kennedy Hyannis Museum showcases the life and times of the 35th President of the United States, who loved spending summers in Hyannis. In addition to its cultural offerings, Hyannis boasts pristine beaches that offer a relaxing respite from the hustle and bustle of everyday life. This is where our case begins today. The night was quiet and peaceful on February 27, 2011, with a gentle breeze blowing through the streets of Hyannis, Massachusetts. But little did anyone know that a heinous crime was about to shatter the tranquility of the neighborhood. Todd Lampley, a young father and a beloved member of the community, was about to meet his untimely demise. As the night wore on, a concerned neighbor went to check on, but as he approached Todd's house, he noticed something was off. The door was locked from the inside. The neighbor's suspicions were raised, and he quickly contacted the authorities. When they arrived, what they found was a scene of horror. Todd Lampley, only 31 years old, lay lifeless in his bedroom with a gunshot wound that had come through his window. The whole of Hyannis was in shock. How could such a thing happen in their peaceful community? The investigation that followed would uncover secrets, lies, and unexpected twists that would leave everyone reeling. The investigators arrived at the address provided by Todd's neighbor, their hearts racing with anticipation and fear. They could only imagine the worst-case scenario, but nothing could have prepared them for what they saw. Todd's lifeless body lay on the floor, and blood was splattered all over the room. It was a gruesome sight. As they examined the crime scene, the investigators' shock turned into curiosity as they began to uncover the evidence. 3 shell casings and a black cell phone were found at the crime scene. It was obvious that Todd was mercilessly gunned down from the outside of his window. The investigators were left puzzled and with hundreds of questions racing through their minds. They combed the area around Todd's house, determined to uncover any clues that could lead them to the killer. No stone was left unturned, no lead left unexplored. The investigators knew that the key to solving the case lay in the details. So they went door to door, interviewing every resident in the area, looking for anyone who had heard or seen anything out of the ordinary on the night of the murders. They listened intently as people shared their stories, piecing together a timeline of events that would help them solve the case. The murder of Todd Lampley took a bizarre turn when investigators discovered an unlikely object at the crime scene. It was a sweet potato, which appeared to have been used as a silencer, muffling the sound of the gunshots. It was as if the perpetrator was taking inspiration from a hit HBO series, The Wire. In the gritty urban landscape of The Wire, a tragic scene unfolds in Season 1. As a woman is ruthlessly gunned down in her own home, the shooter, lurking outside her window in the darkness, taps on the glass to lure her closer before unleashing a fatal shot. This chilling scene echoes the real-life murder of Todd Lampley, who was also shot through his bedroom window on a fateful night in Hyannis, Massachusetts. But that's not the only way the HBO show influenced the murder. Apparently, in Season 4 of the same show, one of the fictional police investigators solves a murder in which the shooter used a potato as a makeshift silencer when fatally shooting his victim. The similarities between this tragedy and the world of The Wire are eerie and haunting, a testament to the show's unflinching portrayal of life on the streets where a similar trick was used to mask a gunshot. The potato was carefully carved to create a hole in the center and placed over the barrel of a gun, muffling the sound of the shots that killed Lampley. To add to the intrigue, the cell phone found at the scene of the shooting was registered under the name of one of the show's characters, Marlo Stanfield. The connection between the show and the crime scene was puzzling to say the least. Investigators sent the sweet potato for testing, discovered DNA evidence on it as a crucial clue that could lead them to the killer. However, it would be years before investigators could connect someone with this DNA. But even then, investigators had another trail to follow. A handgun, believed to be the murder weapon, was later found to have been tossed in a nearby lake. It was later fished out by civilians and was then retrieved by the police. Luckily, detectives had another lead in their investigation at this point. Devaris Hampton, a man with a troubled past and a prolonged criminal record, was wearing a GPS monitoring bracelet around the killing as part of his probation in an unrelated case. Location data on Hampton's GPS monitoring bracelet placed him at the exact location where the gun was thrown into the lake. Phone records revealed that Hampton had exchanged a flurry of calls and texts with a man who was present in Lampley's house at the time of the murder. But the biggest link was yet to be revealed. Detectives discovered that the suspect, Devaris Hampton, had a previous connection with the victim, Todd Lampley. Hampton testified in court that Lampley was involved in the July 2007 murder of Jacques Sellers in the same neighborhood. Interestingly, Jacques was also murdered in the same manner, a gunshot through the window. It's as if Hampton was leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for investigators to follow. With every lead pointing to him, it was only a matter of time before justice was served. The web of lies and deception that Hampton had spun around himself was slowly unraveling. Yet he remained tight-lipped and refused to answer anything about the Todd Lampley case during questioning after getting arrested in an unrelated case just a few days after the shooting. It was a frustrating roadblock, but the investigators didn't give up. They were determined to get to the bottom of the case, no matter what it took. Years of painstaking work finally paid off when DNA evidence connected the murder to Hampton. In 2016, authorities obtained a DNA swab from Hampton without his knowledge by collecting some of his phlegm that he spit into a puddle. When the results came back, they were conclusive. The DNA on the sweet potato matched that of Hampton's spit. It was a breakthrough moment in the case. The puzzle was finally coming together. But despite this damning evidence, it still took 7 years to finally apprehend Devaris Hampton. On February 24, 2023, now 40-year-old Hampton was taken into custody and charged with 1 count each of murder and assault and battery with a dangerous weapon for the fatal shooting of 31-year-old Todd Lampley. Authorities, however, declined to comment on what caused the delay. In a courtroom filled with tension and uncertainty, Hampton made his first appearance before a judge in Barnstable District Court on February 27, 2023, exactly 12 years after the fatal shooting. With a stern expression on his face, he firmly declared his innocence by pleading not guilty to the charges against him. Despite the gravity of the situation, Hampton remained composed and resolute, knowing that the legal battle ahead of him would be a long and arduous one. The courtroom fell silent as the judge set his next court date for April 5, 2023. The case of Todd Lampley's murder might have come to a conclusion and the suspect has been identified, but the investigation is far from finished. Assistant District Attorney Russell Ennis has remained tight-lipped about the delay in the case, only stating that the evidence has been assessed. Meanwhile, Hampton's court-appointed attorney, Edward Fogarty, has promised a vigorous defense and expressed confidence in his client's innocence. For more than 20 years, the case of Army Private Amanda Gonzalez, who was only 19 and pregnant when she was found strangled in her barracks on November 3, 2001, has remained unsolved. Despite efforts to find her killer, the trail had gone cold for many years. Who could potentially be responsible for the murder of an Army private? Was it someone from her barracks or an outsider? During the Cold War, Hanau, Germany was developed into a significant United States Army aviation center, referred to as Fliegerhorst Army Airfield. In 1952, various construction ventures were initiated to re-establish the airfield's military identity. These initiatives included the construction of barracks, hangars, administrative buildings, and other facilities necessary to support the military personnel and their aircraft. As a result, Hanau became an essential facility for the U.S. military during the Cold War. Amanda was born on December 8, 1981 in Hearne, Robertson County, Texas to her parents, Gloria and Santos Gonzalez. Unfortunately, their parents separated when she was still young. Yet, Amanda wasn't deprived of fatherly love in her life. Her mother Gloria met a man and got married to him. From 1986, when she was just 5 years old, she lived with her stepfather, Michael Beets. Amanda spent her formative years in Madisonville, Texas, excelled academically throughout high school, and harbored a passion for becoming a pediatric physical therapist. Private Gonzalez possessed a desire to explore the world. Hence, when the chance to enlist in the Army and serve in Europe after she graduated Madisonville High School in 2000 came up, Amanda seized it without hesitation. "I'm in," Gloria recollected her daughter saying. In March 2001, Amanda was deployed to Germany. In the picturesque German town of Fliegerhorst, where the sounds of military drills and aircraft filled the air, Amanda Gonzalez would spend the following months honing her skills as a cook in the U.S. Army. Away from her home in the Lone Star State of Texas, Amanda felt a sense of excitement and adventure, eager to take on new challenges and opportunities. In November of 2001, which was her first assignment in the Army, Amanda was assigned to Headquarters Supply Company of the 127th Aviation Support Battalion as a cook. Amanda was anxious and happy to tell her mother about her pregnancy, so she picked up the phone and decided to tell her immediately. With a trembling voice, she revealed to her beloved mom that she was expecting a child despite being only 19 years old and on her first assignment in the Army. Despite the shock and unexpected news, Amanda's mother Gloria Bates could sense the joy and anticipation in her daughter's voice as she shared her plans to name the child Alicia Marie. As Amanda navigated the challenges of being a young pregnant soldier in a foreign land, she knew that the love and support of her family back home would be her guiding light. And so, with a heart full of hope and determination, Amanda embraced this new chapter in her life, ready to face whatever lay ahead with courage and resilience. As Miss Bates also mentioned, Private Gonzalez made the most of her leisure time by exploring German castles and taking a road trip to Paris with her friend. However, she confided in her cousins that she was a victim of bullying by some female counterparts on the military base, who were eager to engage in physical confrontations. Undeterred, Private Gonzalez demonstrated remarkable courage and defended herself and others against these bullies. Ms. Bates said that they referred to her as Firecracker because she was always prepared to explode. She added that her daughter was self-reliant and took care of herself, so she believed that she put up a strong resistance. On November 3, 2001, Army Private Amanda Gonzalez was just 19 years old and 4 months pregnant. When she did not report for work, which was highly unlike Amanda, soldiers broke down the door to her barracks and found her lifeless body. She had been strangled, and her death was considered a brutal and violent crime. Her death was classified as a homicide caused by suffocation. According to the FBI, she was 4 months pregnant. The investigation into her death likely involved interviews with her colleagues and friends, forensic analysis of the crime scene, and other methods of evidence gathering. However, it appears that none of these efforts were able to lead to a breakthrough in the case, and the trail of her killer went cold. Despite an investigation by military authorities and the civilian police, her killer was not identified and the case remained unsolved for over 2 decades. This means that the person or persons responsible for her death have remained at large for longer than Amanda Gonzalez lived, which is a tragic and sobering realization. The fact that this case remained unsolved for so long is a reminder of the devastating impact that violent crime can have on individuals, families, and communities. It also highlights the challenge that law enforcement agencies face when trying to solve crimes, particularly when evidence is scarce or leads are few and far between. For 20 long years, the family of the victim was left in a state of unrelenting despair and unimaginable agony. The perpetrator of the heinous crime, the culprit who took away the life of an innocent woman, remained free and unpunished, while the loved ones of the victim were left to pick up the shattered pieces of their lives. Despite the unbearable pain and anguish that she was forced to endure, Gloria refused to let the memory of her daughter fade away into obscurity. She valiantly fought to keep the investigation alive, tirelessly seeking justice for her child who was taken away from her far too soon. With unwavering determination, the mother wrote letters to members of Congress, begging them to take action and bring the perpetrator to justice. She even reached out to popular television shows like Dr. Phil and America's Most Wanted, hoping that the wider exposure would help to turn up new leads and bring the killer to justice. But despite all of her efforts, justice remained elusive. The years continued to tick by, and still no one was charged with the crime. It is difficult to imagine the pain and heartbreak that Gloria Bates and her family must have felt knowing that the person responsible for their loved one's death was still out there, free to live their life without any consequences. The Army commemorated the 10th anniversary of Private Gonzalez's death in 2011 by offering a $125,000 reward for information. Army investigators were hoping that the reward would encourage people to come forward with any relevant information that could help solve the case. CID spokesman Chris Gray stated that keeping the reward to $125,000 demonstrated their determination to solve the case and bring the responsible person or persons to justice. He further added that they were confident that someone out there had information regarding the untimely death of the soldier and her unborn child, and that they were not giving up. Gray strongly encouraged anyone with information to contact them immediately. Despite the offered reward, no progress was made in solving the case. It remains unsolved or cold. The FBI allegedly called Gloria 22 years after the murder to inform her that an arrest had finally been made. Unfortunately, the specifics of how police located and arrested the perpetrator have not been made public. Authorities detained 42-year-old former soldier Shannon L. Wilkerson on February 23, 2023, on suspicion of killing Gonzalez, they announced. He was later discovered to have been a member of the armed forces during the time of Gonzalez's demise. He was discharged from active duty in 2004, just 3 years after Amanda's death. The investigation was being assisted by the Department of the Army Criminal Investigation Division, though privacy regulations prohibit the divulgence of any soldier's discharge characterization. At the time of the murder, Shannon L. Wilkerson would have been 21 years old, and according to the Andalusia Star News, he hails from Andalusia, Alabama. As per the news outlet, the individual was operating a fitness center named Cardio Zone in the region back in 2015. Wilkerson was charged under the Military Extraterritorial Jurisdiction Act, which gave the U.S. federal courts jurisdiction over crimes committed by the United States by, among others, members of the armed forces who were no longer subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Wilkerson was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder, and if he was convicted, he faced a maximum penalty of life in prison. According to court documents, the defendant entered a plea of not guilty during a hearing held after his arrest on February 23, 2023. It has been reported that a trial date has been scheduled for March 27, 2023 in Pensacola, Florida. Ms. Bates, the mother of Amanda Gonzalez, has been informed by investigators that DNA evidence is being examined in the case, although it is unclear whether DNA evidence has linked Mr. Wilkerson to the crime. She plans to attend Mr. Wilkerson's detention hearing in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Florida, which is scheduled to take place in March. as the investigation into the untimely demise of the victim continues, the diligent efforts of the Federal Bureau of Investigation remain steadfast. Despite their tireless work, the motive behind the gruesome killing remains shrouded in mystery, leaving the authorities unable to provide any conclusive details at this time. However, the seasoned professionals at the FBI refuse to relent, and are leaving no stone unturned in their pursuit of justice for the victim and closure for their loved ones. The principle of innocent until proven guilty is a cornerstone of justice, and rightly so. However, for the family of a victim, it can be difficult to accept this principle when they feel that their loved one's perpetrator has yet to face justice. While it is important to respect the legal process, it is also understandable that the family yearns for closure and justice for their loss. Ultimately, we must strive for a balance between the principle of justice and compassion for those affected by crime. Shelley and Warner. At the age of 15, Shelley and Warner resided in Mishawaka, Indiana with her mother, Kathleen Warner. She attended Mishawaka High School, participated in athletics, and played in the band. She said goodbye to her mother on June 16, 1980, and drove her 1973 orange Volkswagen just 2 kilometers away to Wilt's store. But she never made it back home as the day wore on. Concerned, her mother called the police. At first, the police believed she might be a missing person or a runaway. However, the case took a terrifying turn as the clock approached the 24-hour mark. The investigators changed their approach and classified the case as potentially abduction. Officers raced to the Wilt supermarket and began questioning staff members who could clearly recall Shelley and making a 1:30 p.m. grocery purchase the day before. Witnesses described Shelley and's disappearance from the business in a disturbing way. Witnesses clearly recalled seeing Shelley and drive away from the store at 2 p.m. and towards her parked car, which was only 50 feet from the front door. But then something unsettling happened. Shelley was in the driver's seat when a man quickly walked up to her car and opened the driver's side door. Witnesses recalled her astonished, almost scared expression. Shelley moved to the passenger side as the man boldly climbed into the driver's seat. Sadly, the witnesses were unable to determine whether or not he was carrying a firearm because he had his back to them. The orange Volkswagen Beetle rolled along Lincoln Way and headed east. And with that, Shelley Warner disappeared into thin air, leaving a bewildered town and detectives frantically trying to piece together the odd series of events. The man was described by witnesses as being between the ages of 16 and 18, standing 5 feet, 7 inches tall, and weighing approximately 130 pounds. Witnesses provided a thorough description of the individual, highlighting his distinct traits that set him out from the crowd, including his medium-length blonde hair and matching blonde mustache. Suspicion had been raised regarding the man's intentions when he was seen loitering about the store prior to the kidnapping. The man may have been dropped off by a friend or hitchhiked to the store, according to the store employees' speculations. Crime Stoppers, law enforcement, and Michiana painstakingly recreated the scene, publishing a suspect sketch in the hopes of eliciting information. Though several suggestions were made, none yielded the vital discovery that the detectives sorely desired. A park and shop establishment in Osceola, Indiana, was where Shelley's automobile was discovered a few days later. Strangely, there were no indications of conflict within the car. Investigators concluded that the culprit may have left the automobile there in order to avoid being apprehended and carry out his evil plans. The unrelenting pursuit of solutions persisted, but the enigmatic circumstances surrounding Shelley and Warner's disappearance only grew more complex with each new development. A large search and rescue effort was launched, using search dogs, volunteers, and helicopters to thoroughly search the whole area. The 15-year-old went missing, and despite intensive search efforts, there was no sign of him. 10 excruciating days later, 2 females strolling through a forest discovered a depressing and gloomy scene. They discovered a crumbling sadly. It was determined that Shelley Warner, the missing adolescent, was the owner of the lifeless body. Her body was left in a valley, half-clothed. The forensic analysis exposed a terrifying reality. Twice, Shelley had been brutally shot at close range. Her body had been severely damaged by one shot, and her head had been punctured by another. Kathleen Warner, the girl's mother, lost all hope when she learned of the horrific murder that had taken the life of a lively little child. According to autopsy results, Shelly Ann's body was abandoned about 7 to 10 days prior to her unfortunate discovery. Law enforcement believed the horrific nature of the murder might have been inspired by the urge to sexually abuse her, even though the body was in a well-advanced condition of decomposition. Police questioned multiple suspects and relentlessly followed up on several leads. They experimented with non-traditional techniques, going so far as to use hypnosis to elicit further information about Shelly and Warner's kidnapping and tragic death. These attempts, however, produced no significant results, and the case finally fizzled out. Finally, decades later, a reluctant witness came forward motivated by a sense of duty and the bravery to speak up. This person named 3 people connected to Shelly Ann's case. According to detectives, the witness waited until 2 of the suspects had died before speaking out, because they were originally afraid of taking revenge on their family, even though the 3rd suspect had disappeared over time and the other 2 had already died. This new information gave rise to new hopes for justice. Fairness. This information gave detectives a new lease on life, and they decided to reopen the case with the intention of bringing Shelly and Warner's story to life. Investigators discovered other witnesses and a wealth of fresh evidence as the investigation went on, all of which strongly corroborated the witnesses' first account. The case's credibility was increased by the growing body of evidence. While conducting their investigations, the investigators came across a shocking finding. As of 2018, the 3rd suspect who had previously disappeared was officially dead. Additionally, 2 suspects had died, one in 2001 and another in 2010. Cold case team member Dave Dossman underlined how the suspect's death led to a significant witness coming forward and providing vital information. The St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office declared the evidence against the 3 suspects to be conclusive in 2023, after carefully reviewing all of the statements and evidence that had been collected. However, officials were unable to press charges against the 3 suspects because they had all died. Since no charges could be brought against the accused, their names were never made public. Following the conclusion of the inquiry, law enforcement officials revealed that Warner's assault was not an isolated incident. Although Shelly Ann Warner was not personally acquainted with the suspects, she was somewhat acquainted with some of their relatives. Dossman's admission confirmed a harsh reality. Though it wasn't immediately clear, Shelly and Warner knew the suspects. Dossman clarified the relationship by saying that she would have known who these individuals were and vice versa. The chief detective revealed the sobering truth about the reasons for the delays as he thought back on the protracted inquiry. The perpetrator's intimidation and threats against possible witnesses halted the investigation. They scared not just the witnesses, but also their relatives. The case was reluctantly terminated after an agonizing 43 years, despite the fact that the culprits were never brought before the scales of justice. For the family, not even time has provided them closure. Shelly Ann's sister is the only surviving link to a tragic history after her parents passed away. Although her sister took solace in the case's eventual resolution, the unfulfilled justice and lack of recognizable DNA on the evidence delivered to the lab acted as a somber reminder of what could never be recovered. If Shelly and Warner's wonderful life hadn't been taken so violently, she would have turned 58 today. This terrible tale concludes without justice being served, leaving a legacy of unresolved issues and a yearning for what may have been. Moving on to the next case. John Harris Jr. On February 4th, 1989, at around 4 in the morning, a man broke into an apartment in San Mateo, California. Then he entered the victim's bed with a knife. A bandana was draped over his face. After attacking her indecently, he stabbed her. After calling 911, the victim subdued her attacker by some means. Fortunately, the woman lived, but she was unable to identify the unidentified male. The suspect's DNA was taken from her body and preserved for potential use at a later time. Investigators identified the suspect via genetic genealogy in December 2020. He was recognized as John Harris Jr., age 55. The arrest occurred in February of 2021. Right now, he has a booking in the main San Mateo County Jail. A $500,000 bond has been posted for him. It is my wish that the detectives look into if he is connected to any further crimes. Moving on to the next case. Sharon Pryor. At the age of 16, Sharon Pryor was residing in Point St. Charles, Montreal, Canada with her mother. She was characterized by her family and friends as a trustworthy, amiable, and gentle adolescent who avoided difficulty. Her twin sisters mentioned that she cherished animals and aspired to work as a veterinarian. Sharon painted Easter eggs for the impending Easter holiday on Saturday evening, March 29, 1975. Sharon left her house after dinner with her family to go to Marina's Pizzeria with pals, as was her weekend ritual. Sharon was scared to walk outside because she didn't want her suede jacket to get ruined because it had started to shower. Her mother gave her the reassurance that the jacket would hold up. Around 7 o'clock at night, a friend saw her cross the street in front of her house. She never made it to the pizza, even though it was just a 5-minute walk from her house. It was supposed by her buddies at the pizza place that she had gone to her boyfriend's hockey game after meeting up with him. When Sharon failed to return home later that evening, Yvonne, her mother, started to worry. On the weekends, Sharon would frequently go out, but she would always make it home by 11 p.m., calling her mother to let her know she would be running late. Yvonne was worried and called Sharon's pals, but they informed her that Sharon was not present at the pizza place. She then called her partner, but he had also not seen her. Yvonne called the police and reported her missing. Police, friends, relatives, and community volunteers all participated in the search, but to no effect. Yvonne appeared on television and publicly begged for her daughter's safe return. A beekeeper would discover Sharon's death in a field at Chimit Dulit and Guillemot Boulevard 4 days later. A buddy had called the beekeeper to let him know that his gate to the field was open. He would frequently shut the gate since the field was occasionally used as a landfill. He discovered Sharon's body and called the police as he was about to latch the gate. Sharon had been killed by beatings and sexual assault. She was discovered with her shoes, socks, sweater, and suede jacket on. Her underwear was discovered on a neighboring limb, and her jeans were discovered a short distance away. According to an autopsy, Sharon passed away about 20 hours before her body was discovered. Before she was killed, it is thought that she had been held captive for 3 days. Because Sharon was found clutching branches in her hands, police also thought that she might have been alive when her body was discarded in the field. About 15 feet from the crime scene, authorities discovered a tire truck, which may indicate that she was carried in a car before being dumped. Additionally, police discovered a size 8.5 shoe print next to the gate, indicating that a smaller individual may have been involved. At the crime site, police discovered a guy's shirt that had been used to restrain Sharon. The man appeared to be of a bigger build, weighing approximately 90 kilograms or approximately 200 pounds and perhaps standing around 6 feet tall. Police questioned if there were 2 suspects in the murder. From the crime site, DNA might be recovered by the police. A sliver of duct tape hanging from Sharon's hair gave the impression that she had been choked. Police conducted an inquiry and found that a woman had been attacked with a knife in the same area around 7 p.m. the night before Sharon vanished. The woman yelled, drawing attention from onlookers, and the attacker fled the scene. Some conjectured that when he was fleeing from attacking the previous woman, the same man might have bumped into Sharon and kidnapped her. The man in the lineup was selected by the woman who had been attacked just before Sharon vanished, but she wasn't positive it was the same man, so the police had to let him go. 6 years later, Tammy Leakey, a 12-year-old girl, vanished a short distance from the location where Sharon vanished. After a day, her body was discovered. She had been killed by beating, strangling, and rape. Subsequently, an FBI profiler would assert that the murders were committed by the same perpetrator or killers. For a long time, it was impossible to get a full DNA profile from the clothes discovered at the crime scene. But thanks to developments in DNA technology, a comprehensive male DNA profile has now been produced. Police forwarded the DNA profile to a West Virginia lab in 2019. Police quickly discovered that the individual they were searching for was related to the Romine family. Equipped with this evidence, Eric, the detective looking into the case, laboriously combed through databases linked to any previous crimes in the area where she was abducted or discovered. After searching through newspapers, public databases, and other information he could get his hands on, he eventually located Franklin Maywood Romine, guy who had resided in Montreal the year Sharon Pryor was murdered. Franklin and Sharon were barely 9 kilometers apart or less than 6 miles apart. Moreover, Franklin's physical attributes corresponded with the person who had made an attempt to kidnap the 23-year-old on Wellington Street. The investigator also found out that Franklin had driven a dark red Rambler with tires that were identical to the ones that left a tire print at the scene of Sharon's death. Franklin had a lengthy criminal history, both in the US and Canada. In 1964, he was imprisoned in a penitentiary in West Virginia for an unrelated offense. He had fled the prison in 1967 and relocated to Canada, but in just 2 years, he had also accrued a criminal record there. He was taken into custody in 1974 in Parkersburg, West Virginia, after breaking into a home and assaulting a woman. 2 months after being freed on a $25,100 bond, he absconded once more, this time to Canada. He would go on to murder Sharon Pryor a few months later. Shortly after Sharon Pryor was killed in 1975, Franklin Romine was captured by Canadian border guards and extradited back to West Virginia. He was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison there for the sexual assault he had committed in the Parkersburg case. Franklin was never thought to be a suspect in the Sharon Pryor case. Sadly, he was never charged since he died in Canada in 1982, not long after being freed from prison in connection with the Parkersburg case. But authorities haven't been able to track down a death certificate that would have revealed more information about how he passed away. When his body was excavated in April 2023, it was discovered that his DNA exactly matched the DNA found at the Sharon Pryor murder scene. Sharon's mother, Yvonne Pryor, is currently 80 years old and still resides in Canada. Her whole life, she has been looking for her daughter's killer. The family expressed gratitude to the authorities on both sides of the border, citing what they called the miracle of science in locating the teen's killer. Maureen, Sharon's sister, encapsulates the family's viewpoint on this now closed issue. Even if you might not have returned to our home or Congregation Street that particular weekend, you have remained in our hearts and never will. Sharon, you are loved by us. May you now find true serenity and rest. Moving on to the next case. Diana, workers at the Wright City Rest Area in the state of Missouri found an unidentified torso near some shrubs on June 28, 2004. The victim's torso was unrecognizable due to the extreme brutality of the mutilation. It had no head, arms, or legs, so detectives had an extremely hard time identifying it. This cold case, which required 18 years of non-stop investigation to solve, would be detailed, along with how the police finally identified the torso and what happened to the victim. We are going to Wright City, Missouri for this case today. For outdoor enthusiasts, Wright City, Missouri is a little city that is sometimes overlooked. There is something for everyone in the area with the variety of outdoor activities available. Whether you want to unwind and enjoy the scenery or go on an exhilarating adventure, Wright City has everything you could ever want. The city has bathing areas, fishing holes, hiking and bike trails, and more. Wright City has an abundance of outdoor recreational possibilities, ranging from riding through its woodland trails to boating on Lake Calhoun. Its broad landscapes and historical buildings make it the perfect place for anyone looking for a true small-town experience. One of the biggest benefits of residing in a town like Wright City is the low crime rate. Knowing they are surrounded by a tight-knit community makes the residents feel safer at night. When a terrifying revelation rocked the small village in 2004, it seemed that this was not the case. The small hamlet of Wright City awoke to a sluggish morning on June 28, 2004. In town, hardly much was going on. Like every other day, a few workers were preparing to tidy up the picnic area near the Interstate 70 Wright City rest stop. Some were watering the plants while others were clearing up garbage. To make it easier for guests to sit in the picnic area, a crew of workers was in charge of pruning the trees and shrubs that surrounded it. They had no idea that the results of this cleaning would be so awful that it would take 18 years for even the police to handle it. Some of the housekeeping staff found an odd thing inside the picnic area's deep end while they were pruning the plants. The workmen discovered a carcass when they came closer to look at the weird thing. They were incorrect to think it was a mannequin at first. It was the torso of a woman. No whole body was present. The only thing the workers could see was a torso. No hands, no legs, nothing at all. They knew something wasn't right about this, and they alerted the police to the site. When the police got there, they saw that the woman's torso had 2 surgical incisions around her abdomen and was wearing a black bra. The marks were quickly interpreted by the authorities to be the result of a cesarean section or appendectomy. The cops dispersed and started irregularly combing the area in an attempt to gather more clues. Some police officers found a knife in a nearby sewer that had alien DNA on it while searching for clues. The DNA that wasn't the victim's was also found on the torso by the police. The only problem was that there was no way to identify the victim. Even though the police believed that this foreign DNA was most likely that of the murderer, the police failed in their exhaustive search of the entire city for more bits of the victim's mutilated body. It looked like every body part had been cut off and discarded at multiple distant spots from Wright City. Since they were unable to positively identify the body, the police were initially perplexed. There was only a black bra and a torso on the body. It had no hands, no legs, and no face. It may be possible to link the DNA of the missing torso with a relative. However, once more, there are no recognized family members when the body is unidentified. It was impossible for the authorities to visit every residence in Wright City and collect DNA samples because they had no idea if the torso belonged to a resident. The complexity of this case was astounding. Imagine having to identify a body without hands, legs, a face, a family, or even a house. The only way the investigation could have continued was if someone had come up to the police and said they knew the person whose body had been found near the picnic spot. But this is precisely what occurred in 2016, when local police officer Brian Barker was taken into custody and accused of committing crimes. Brian Barker acknowledged to the authorities that he had reported his sister missing in 2006, but that the incident had never been looked into while he was being held by the police. He said that the torso found in the picnic area in Wright City might be his sister's. Brian may have acted in this way because he genuinely loved his sister, or just wanted to help the cops get off the hook for some of the crimes he had previously committed. Since his sister had been missing for 2 years, Brian Barker went to the police station in 2006 and requested that they file a report. The police took action at the time, but after that, Brian's case was dropped because neither he nor the police knew where his sister might be. Still, Brian Barker's story did not finish there. Brian Barker was a notorious police officer. While carrying out his duties, he had broken numerous laws and would continue to do so for years to come. Between 2009 and 2014, the Edwardsville Police Department received multiple reports of burglaries related to businesses. The average number of these complaints was close to 24 every year. To make a long tale short, following Brian Barker's imprisonment, the number of complaints decreased to around 6 each year. It was because Brian was a thug in addition to being a dishonest police officer. His trick was to show his police credentials and threaten people while he was robbing or stealing. He was accused of stealing weapons, valuables, and breaking into houses nearby. The court sentenced 43-year-old Brian Barker to 40 years in prison for his offenses. In order to try to have his sentence lowered, Barker may have benefited from aiding the authorities with the unidentified torso investigation. For 10 years, the case remained unsolved due to a lack of clues to identify the found torso. Lieutenant Matt Schmutz of the Warren County Sheriff's Office revived the case later in 2014. And in 2016, investigators chose to give Brian Barker more time. They made an effort to match the torso with his DNA sample. The samples did not match, despite Brian's insistence that the torso belonged to his sister, and the authorities started to think he was lying to get a less sentence. Brian insisted that his DNA be tested again, and so it was, along with samples from other family members. Again, a new sample of DNA was obtained from the torso and sent for examination. DNA sampling is an extremely difficult procedure. The DNA of a father and his daughters might not match, but the father's and the niece's did. This was what had happened to Brian's DNA samples before. They had not matched the torsos before, but the match was made when other family members gave their samples. After multiple attempts to compare the DNA samples of the family members, Ashley Kinnear, Brian's sister's daughter, yielded the most meaningful matches. Given that the first unidentified torso was actually his sister, Brian Barker was not lying after all. At last, the authorities made progress in the case when they learned that Deanna Denise Howland was the owner of the unidentifiable torso. Following this revelation, a further significant problem surfaced. Deanna did not have a single surname or known home address. She had taken on many surnames due to her multiple marriages and the fact that she had 5 children with different fathers. A portion of Deanna Denise Howland's upbringing was spent in Edwardsville and Collinsville. Her father was a banker and a union organizer. She did not have a difficult childhood, but as she got older, things got more harder for her. She was also ensnared in the terrifying web of drug addiction. Diana eventually became one of those family members who left the house too often and frequently never comes back as time went on. Because she was an addict and drug dealers got more expensive as police stations spread around the country, she was unable to maintain herself. Diana seemed doomed for a life of hardship. She knew she would never be able to support her family, so she never stayed with them. For Diana, it was more important to support herself, but even that was becoming more difficult due to her drug issues. Diana, poor Diana, took the riskiest route so she could be on her own. She made the choice to become a prostitute. She believed that prostitution was her only means of subsistence. Diana has been involved with multiple guys throughout her adult life while using narcotics in order to increase her income. Because of her publicized lifestyle and profession, Diana had regular run-ins with the law. She was also incarcerated for a long period. Diana's daughter Ashley Kinnear claims that her numerous trips to jail made it nearly automatic for her to escape unscathed. Diana was a devoted mother who loved her kids no matter how she lived. When she was freed from prison, she would make time for her children and see them. She would eat with them and then go out to continue her dangerous hustle. Even though Ashley had spent the majority of her life apart from her mother, Ashley knew that Diana felt the same way about her. Even though Diana wasn't around very often, she said Diana never forgot her birthday and would call her each year. Prior to her disappearance, Diana had assured Ashley that she would see the play in which Ashley was performing. However, Diana did not appear the following day, and Ashley became aware that something was off. Diana Dennis Howland also went by the aliases Diana Kinnear and Diana Frolic in addition to her maiden name, Diana Barker. Diana was born in Belleville, Illinois, married in 1991, and had at least 2 children before filing for divorce from her spouse 4 years later. According to court documents, her relatives could not be found or declined to speak. Diana was cut off from her family and had a nomadic lifestyle. She was last seen in the regions of Alton Granite City and East St. Louis prior to her abduction in May 2004. The Missouri State Police are used to looking into the family history of missing persons. A genetic genealogy program helped solve the 10-year-old case of T.J. Emily's disappearance. On March 25, 1990, T.J. Emily went for a walk, but he never returned home. A case was started for a missing person in the same year, but nothing turned up. 2 years later, on March 7, 1992, a skeleton was found in an old abandoned building. A similar story to Diana's. The authorities failed in their attempt to identify the skeleton's DNA. Years later, when the case was revived, the police collaborated with the DNA Doe Project and NGO. They quickly determined that T's skeleton belonged to him, J. Emily, via a thorough examination spanning 2 decades. In 2019, yet another horrific case was solved with the application of genetic genealogy. In 1993, 9-year-old Angie Hausman ran away from her family and never returned. Her body was discovered in a protected area close to St. Louis. 9 days after she disappeared, her captor had left her there, and because her lips had been duct taped shut, she eventually suffocated to death. A DNA sample was taken from Angie's cut pants and sent to a laboratory. Years later, the investigators used genetic genealogy to determine that Angie's killer was retired naval officer Earl Webster Cox. Going back to Diana's situation, the same thing happened here. The authorities tested the DNA of the murderer found on the unidentified torso, and on the knife left at the crime site after learning that the unidentified torso belonged to Diana Dennis Howland. DNA samples were taken from Diana's lower torso, and some of the sample was also found on the knife that the police had found in the sewer. 2019 saw the authorities take a DNA sample from the weapon. The samples were delivered to the lab to be inspected by scientists working on the genetic genealogy program by the police once they obtained the DNA. After running tests non-stop for nearly 3 years, the police were able to gradually narrow their search. And with the help of further advancements in genetic genealogy, they were able to find Mike A. Clardy, the culprit. Mike A. Clardy and his wife were living in Maryland Heights when he was discovered by the authorities. Furthermore, Mike A. Clardy had no vision, but did he not see Diana's horrific murder? No. Mike lost his vision after Diana was slain in an incident that had nothing to do with her. Mike acknowledged killing Diana on the evening of June 28, 2004, following his apprehension. It is important to understand that Mike was neither a criminal or a serial killer before Diana was killed. Never in his life had he been arrested by the police for anything, much less murder. So why did he murder Diana? Mike's account of what happened is that Diana, a prostitute at the time, frequently visited Mike's house on the 3500 block of Dixie Drive in St. and Mike would frequently bring her male clients. But on June 26, 2004, on one of Diana's trips, Mike and Diana got into a quarrel in the evening. The dispute surpassed all rational boundaries and Mike's fury caused him to go insane. Mike ultimately killed Diana and dismembered her body. Parts 1 and 2 were dumped at the appropriate city rest area, while the remaining pieces were dispersed over Warren and St. Louis counties. The authorities never found Diana's other body parts, despite their best efforts. Mike's family and neighbors were taken aback by his arrest and confession. Mike's neighbors couldn't possibly witness him in this situation. They were unaware that the 63-year-old blind guy would be behind such a horrific murder. Mike has been given a $1 million bond by the judge, and he will most certainly serve a life term. Diana's family story is undoubtedly a tragic one. Even more tragically, most of her family stopped thinking about her as soon as she disappeared, never realizing what terrible fate had befallen her. Her daughter Ashley Kenya will always remember her mother Diana and how much she loved her, even though society often links drug addicts and prostitutes with these negative connotations. Ashley was enraged when Diana's killer was eventually found and taken into custody. After nearly 2 decades, Ashley, at least, was able to find closure. Justice had finally been served, all thanks to the relentless efforts of law enforcement and forensic experts who never gave up on this case. While it couldn't bring Diana back or make her love for her kids whole again, it can serve as a message to all killers that their crimes will never go unpunished and that they will always have to face the consequences of their actions. Cindy Ann Blazek was born on February 3, 1962 to James and Jean in Rosetown, Saskatchewan. Youngest of 4 on a cattle and grain farm, book smart, steady, the kid who'd volunteer before you finished asking. In high school, she did it all. Honors, cheerleading, candy striping. Summers in university, she was a care aide at the seniors' home. Families told her parents their loved ones were calmer after Cindy's visits. She chose teaching for the same reason. She just wanted to help. By 1984, degree in hand, she took her first job in Pelican Narrows on Peter Ballantine Cree Nation. 2 years later, she moved to the resource room at Chief Taylor Elementary on Onion Lake Cree Nation near Lloydminster. Saturday night, December 6, 1986, around 2:15 a.m., her boyfriend, RCMP Constable David Gray Eyes, called from Pelican Narrows. Mostly yes, no stuff, then I love you. Later, her family learned the bedroom phone cord had been cut. Her brother, Jamie, thinks she wasn't annoyed. She just couldn't say more. Before daylight, violence moved through that house. Investigators believe there were at least 2 attackers. It started in the master bedroom, dragged down the hall, into the kitchen, into the living room. Broad smears on the walls, blood through the carpet and underlay into the linoleum. Cindy fought hard. Deep defensive cuts on every finger of her right hand, 2 on her left. The pathologist counted 13 stab wounds, 11 to the neck, an artery severed, no smoke in her lungs. No seminal evidence. Afterwards, someone set the house on fire. Around 3 p.m. Sunday, December 7th, firefighters and police found her inside. She was 24. Police charged two people, 22-year-old Braun Oliver Perry and a 17-year-old from Lloydminster. A jury first found Perry guilty, but that verdict got tossed because jurors saw material they shouldn't have. The case moved, new trial, June 1988, acquittal. The judge said the proof wasn't there and criticized a photo lineup. That same year, the youth was tried and acquitted too. Again, not enough to convict. 2 courts, 2 acquittals, no one held to account. What the scene still says is simple and awful. A long fight through the home, injuries that prove she fought. Medical findings that put death before the fire. The Blazicks didn't go quiet. Jamie drove back to Onion Lake again and again, talking to anyone who'd talk, passing tips to RCMP, just pushing. He and his sister Debbie say they still don't have the full picture of those hours. They want the truth in order. The questions don't change. Who came into that cul-de-sac? After she was killed, her mom created the Cindy Blazick Memorial Award for the most improved grade 4 resource room student at Onion Lake and presented the first one with Jamie. One recipient, Priscilla Horse, was murdered in 1997. Another loss in the same community Cindy chose to serve. Right now, Saskatchewan RCMP still lists Cindy's homicide as active. They've said sharing more detail publicly won't help. John Eva Carice was born on February 18, 1958. By 43, she was an Indigenous mother of 3 from Kirkland Lake, Ontario. Warm, energetic, and a little stubborn in the best way. A blood clot on Christmas Eve 1991 stopped her heart. She survived, but the brain injury that followed wrecked her short-term memory. Families say she became childlike at times, repeating herself, losing track, needing someone close by. She still talked about becoming a welder. Mostly she just wanted to be with her kids. After she got sick, her husband tried to care for her. It was a lot. 2 young children, 4 and 2, and a partner who suddenly needed round-the-clock help. With guidance from their family doctor, the decision was made to place her at North Bay Psychiatric Hospital about 3 hours away, so she'd be safe and watched. Dawn moved in during the early 90s and stayed until 2001. Staff remembered her as witty and friendly and always planning to get back to her children. She even gave herself a nickname, the Running Bear. The hospital kept her own close observation, but she still slipped away. Between 1997 and 2001, she left 9 times. And every time they found her on the grounds or along Highway 11, sometimes facing the wrong direction, sometimes the right one, it was always about home. Thursday, August 9, 2001. Earlier that day, she'd been in the craft room. An exit door sat about 29 feet away. She was left alone, long enough to go. What rattled the family later was this. Her duffel bag and her native status card were also missing, even though personal items were supposed to be locked in a secure vault. Family and advocates have raised a serious concern. A staff member, later convicted in an unrelated homicide case, had access to the secure vault where Dawn's status card was kept. Dawn wouldn't have had access to that room, yet her card vanished the same day she did. Staff didn't call police until the next day. About 16 hours later, Dawn and those belongings were never found. Her case sits inside a larger troubling pattern. She was one of 6 patients who vanished from that hospital between 1966 and 2010. Former staff have described a place stretched thin, too many patients, not enough staff, and record-keeping that left gaps you could fall through. The hospital opened in 1952, closed in 2011, and the buildings were demolished in 2013. Answers didn't come down with the walls. People did try. North Bay Police interviewed staff, family, and friends. Alerts went out to other agencies and to the public. A couple of tips surfaced early, but nothing stuck. Police haven't declared foul play in Dawn's case, and they haven't ruled it out either. Maybe she got lost in the woods by the property. Maybe she caught a ride and something went wrong. Maybe she checked in somewhere under her own name and privacy rules kept anyone from connecting the dots. Her daughter Sandra kept digging. Through her own research, she learned a man, someone she considers a person of interest, visited her mom around 11 a.m. that morning. At the time, she was told he was still an inpatient. Later, she learned he was actually living in the community and could come and go. Among Don's things, Sandra says she found a photo album inscribed to her mother with his name and the nickname, the Prince. Felt personal. She's never shaken the belief that he might know something. Years later, staff who spoke with a private investigator shared a last sighting around 11:30 a.m., not 5 p.m., as listed in the original police report. A shift like that changes where you look and how soon you get there. Sandra has asked the lead detective to interview this person of interest. She says it still hasn't happened. There's been outside help too. Ellen White, a former private investigator, volunteers on cold cases and shares what she learns on her podcast, Whereabouts Unknown. Listeners have provided tips, and through those responses, she learned more about the missing duffel and the status card, both reportedly gone from the vault when Dawn left that last time. Meanwhile, the tools to search have improved. In 2018, a new DNA data bank in Canada began comparing missing person profiles with unidentified human remains. A match can happen in the background after submissions are made. Even amateur sleuths look through public profiles to suggest connections. In the first 3 years, 38 matches were made, giving families answers they'd waited on for years. Tips still trickle in. Potential sightings of Dawn have been reported across the country, far more than anything that surfaced in those first months. One video from Brussels, Ontario looked promising, ruled out after local police confirmed the woman was known to them and not Dawn. Another sighting in a Timmins coffee shop turned out to be a professional who proved her identity. False leads frustrate everyone, but they keep the conversation going. Some details never fade. Dawn was last seen in a long pink, short-sleeve dress with a white floral print, a button front, and a crisscross drawstring at the back. She wore reddish-brown closed-toe sandals and may have been carrying a duffel. When she ran before, she tended to head for Highway 11 toward Kirkland Lake. She also knew her children's guardians were planning a move to Sudbury, so that direction may have made sense, too. Either way, both roads felt like a path back to her kids. Dawn was a loving, vibrant, proud Indigenous woman from the Odanak First Nation. Her case is open, and her family believes it hasn't been treated with the seriousness it deserves. Dean Kelly Morrison was born on May 27, 1969. At 44, he was in Kamloops, British Columbia, a father of 3, Annie, Edie, and Paz. That fall, most jobs ran along Highway 5 around Stump Lake, between Kamloops and Merritt. He and his wife had recently separated. Family says he was trying to steady himself, but he felt low. October 22, 2013, Dean's at Stump Lake Ranch. His van won't start. Around 9 a.m., the manager spots him, rough around the edges, wanting to head out. Accounts say he was let go that morning after appearing lethargic and unkempt. A tow is called. He's asked to tidy his work area while they wait. By midday, the tow truck rolls in. No Dean. The manager checks the outbuildings, the yard. Nothing. A little after 1 p.m., the truck leaves. Dean doesn't. He's just gone. About a week passes before the missing person report is filed. Ranch staff scour the property for weeks. In October 2019, search and rescue comes back. Fresh teams, new grids, pushing into gullies and thin timber around Stump Lake. Nothing. Dean called his mother Elizabeth every week. On days off, he stayed with his sister, who was managing anxiety and depression. Elizabeth says the sister gave him Ativan. The manager later told a reporter Dean seemed impaired that morning. His road to Stump Lake wasn't straight. He and his wife once ran a cafe in Merritt. In Langley, he'd twice put his name forward as an NDP candidate. During the 2013 campaign, he worked for MLA Harry Lawley, then slid into community reporting at the Merritt News and later the Merritt Herald briefly as editor. Dean's wallet and personal effects were found in his trailer. No money moved in his bank account after he vanished. Decades earlier, Dean's grandfather vanished, was declared dead, and surfaced 30 years later living on the streets. An uncle disappeared in the 1970s and was found murdered soon after. In the years after Dean vanished, attention stretched across the interior to other disappearances. Luke Neville, 48, was last seen October 9, 2017, around Spence's Bridge, where he lived and worked as a renovation contractor. The next day, his white Ford E250 was found burned on a Forest Service road about 12 miles out. RCMP deemed the case suspicious. A year in, investigators renewed appeals, hoping time might loosen lips. Luke had roots in eastern Canada, years in firefighting with his brothers, and a settled life in Spence's Bridge. 15 months after he was reported missing, his brother Mark flew in from Ottawa to post billboards and stand with RCMP. Police told the family they suspected foul play. A little more than an hour southeast lies the Nicola Valley, where a massive search launched in winter 2019 for 32-year-old Ben Tyner, the new manager at Nicola Ranch. Last seen the afternoon of January 26th. His horse turned up 2 days later on a logging road, fully tacked, rain broken. With temperatures plunging and no sign of his route, the search stood down after 7 days. That spring, RCMP said there was reason to believe criminality was involved. May have been the victim of homicide. Years later, he still hasn't been found. Early questions asked whether these disappearances were connected. RCMP said they looked for links and found none. As of September 2025, none of the three men, Dean Morrison, Luke Neville, or Ben Tyner, has been located. There was a surge of hope near Kamloops in April 2025, when skeletal remains were found on rural land near Greenstone Road in the Pendleton Creek area. In June, RCMP identified them as Jordan Dean Nandi, 27, missing since March 2023. Investigators believe foul play led to his death. He'd been under a court-ordered curfew in Fort St. John, had an active warrant, and had reportedly traveled south with local associates weeks before his family reported him missing. Many locals talk about a darker pattern in that stretch of the interior. More men gone, more questions than answers. Marshall Iwasa, 27, missing since November 2019, his burned-out truck found on a logging road near Darcy. Ryan Preventure, 38, and Richard Skur, 37, last seen July 17, 2019, found dead a month later, with RCMP saying criminality was involved. Ryan Stuka, 20, last seen February 17, 2018, at a Kamloops area ski resort. James Gregory Lee was born on July 29, 1992. Everyone called him Jamie. He grew up a good-looking kid, full of energy and easy smiles. At 19, he was living just 4 blocks from his parents in Grand Prairie, Alberta. Most nights, he still came home for supper, a little TV, and the comfort of routine. He wasn't in trouble, wasn't hanging around a bad crowd. He was in welding school, planning to make a career of it. Most mornings his mom drove him to work and picked him up after, even though he could have walked. That was just their rhythm. In 2011, his father's health was failing because of a rare kidney disease. On September 3rd, Jamie finally got good news. His mom had been approved to donate a kidney, a life-saving match. His parents told him as they drove home from the ICU in Edmonton. Later that day, Jamie called after work, excited. He was heading out for a last-minute camping trip with friends, lifted by the good news. The group went to McLeod Flats Campground, also called Smoky Flats. It was familiar ground, a mile-long dirt road leading to a river spot where local kids often camped. That dry year, the river was so low you could drive straight onto what was usually an island. That weekend, hundreds of young people filled the area. By night, the party was in full swing. Jamie had a lot to drink. Friends later said he didn't seem himself. Still down about his dad, even though the transplant news should have been a lift. Near dawn, Jamie said he wanted to go home. He climbed into his Jeep with the keys. His friends, not wanting him to drink and drive, pulled him out. In the scuffle, he hit his head hard on the steel frame of the driver's door. He yelped, insisted he was fine, then angry and amped. walked off into the bush sometime between 4:30 and 5 a.m. He was never seen again. At 5:30, his friends grew worried and started looking. By chance at 6 a.m., a specialized search and rescue team arrived at Smoky Flats for training, a complete fluke, and immediately joined in. For more than a month, volunteers and officials combed the area. Grid teams on foot, horses, aircraft, even canoes along the river. The river was checked by boat, but with levels so low that year, drowning seemed unlikely. Searchers found some of Jamie's belongings, his cigarettes, a piece of his medical ID card, and a first aid certificate with his name. About a mile from the campsite, those items were lying on a dirt road. His mom later explained he might have gotten frustrated when he realized his lighter was still in the Jeep, and he might have thrown the cigarettes down. The terrain was difficult, old logged ground, thick with deadfall. Some parts of the search were frustrating. Witnesses said RCMP tried to canine once, then put the dog away because of too many people. The family brought in private canine teams. One dog followed Jamie's scent through the campground, across the river, into the bush, and then strangely up a tree. The handler said the dog stopped and looked up, something rarely seen. On the far side of the tree, the scent picked up again and led to a gravel pit 3 miles away. There, on a small mound, searchers found a single, clear shoe impression. Just days before, Jamie had bought new Adidas sneakers. They were a size 13 with a distinctive outsole. The store confirmed only 2 pairs in that size had been sold in town. The print was very likely his. A second dog began at the gravel pit, tracked the scent further, and stopped at a busy road, suggesting he may have been picked up by a vehicle. Weeks later, tips surfaced. A red logging truck had pulled up to the volunteer search table along Highway 40. The driver, described as about 30 with shoulder-length blonde hair, said he'd picked up a young man the morning after Jamie disappeared. He noted the boy had blood on him and dropped him off in Grand Cache, 2.5 hours away. Jamie's mom tried to chase it down. She says RCMP weren't interested. She tracked the truck, photographed it, and learned it had changed hands just weeks after Jamie vanished. The opportunity to question that driver was lost. At home, the change was immediate. Jamie had been the son who always stopped in for supper, who was always around. Suddenly, the chair he favored sat empty. The town rallied. 200 searchers a day, even staff from the local museum where his mother worked. But as weeks stretched into months, no answers came. RCMP eventually polygraphed all of Jamie's friends from that night. According to them, every one of the boys passed cleanly and their accounts stayed consistent. Jamie's case went quiet for years, officially inactive after 2016. Recently, it was transferred to the County of Grand Prairie RCMP, where a new investigator has started fresh. Molly Anita Margaret Justice was born circa 1927. By 15, she lived on Brett Avenue in Saanich, British Columbia, just east of Swan Lake, where the Canadian National Railway grade cut a quick-line home. It was wartime, cold air, and a hint of snow. January 18, 1943, Molly steps off the 5:50 p.m. bus after her shift at General Warehouse Ltd., a garment factory where a teenager's already trusted as head seamstress. The driver watches her stride into the dark. She doesn't like that walk along the tracks, but the shortcut is the shortcut and it points straight home. She never makes it. A couple leaving Swan Lake spots blood-stained packages. Officers follow the trail to the rail bed, what's now the Galloping Goose, and find her face down in the snow. Her body's still warm. 2 heavy blows to the head, nearly 24 stab wounds from a small blade. Her purse and a ring are gone. There's no sexual assault. Saanich police bring in Victoria and provincial officers, plus the Army's Provost Corps. They retrace her route off at Carey Road, along University to Douglas, over to Vernon, down the embankment by the bridge, then onto the CNR grade. She's killed at the next crossing, where the tracks meet Darwin Road. Detectives even try hot water to free clues, then stop before they wash them away. A municipal reward brings silence. 2 weeks later, Swan Lake gives up new leads. Under an upside-down bucket, Molly's purse and a lighter engraved RL, no usable prints. Nearby, men's tan capeskin gloves, soft full lining, snug elastic wrist ring by 2. Then, on May 16, 1943, an 11-year-old girl was sexually assaulted by 15-year-old Francis James Halbert, who went by Frank and sometimes used the last name Pepler. During the assault, he threatened the girl, saying he was going to do to her what he did to Molly. He was arrested the same day and convicted for the assault 2 weeks later. He was questioned about Molly, but denied being responsible for her murder and instead pointed investigators to his co-worker, 49-year-old William Mitchell, saying Mitchell had confessed. Mitchell was arrested and tried for the murder. However, due to the lack of evidence and a workplace alibi placing him at work on the night of the murder, he was acquitted. 24 years later, in 1967, Halbert's name resurfaced, not for a murder charge, but for perjury related to what he'd said as a youth during the Mitchell proceedings. Over the years, Halbert reportedly admitted on multiple occasions to murdering Molly, but he was never charged with the homicide. Instead, he received 4.5 years in prison for perjury. Over the years, rumors swirled that he avoided a murder charge because he was related to then-Deputy Attorney General Eric Pepler, but a 1996 review found no evidence to support that claim. The review did not declare a perpetrator, though police have long indicated they believe Halbert was likely the killer. Unfortunately, evidence recovered at the time, such as hair reportedly found under Molly's fingernails and a fingerprint on items from her purse, was not retained. Investigators did find an unlabeled brown-handled knife in the evidence decades later and had it tested, but no blood was found on the blade. It remains unclear whether this was the actual murder weapon. It's now been over 82 years since Molly was murdered, and as of September 2025, the case remains unsolved. 24-year-old Rita Corin was brutally murdered in her own apartment in Burlington, Vermont on July 19, 1971. The killer left no clues, no fingerprints, and vanished into thin air. At the time, with forensic and DNA science being not as advanced as it is today, there was not much the police could do. For 50 to 52 years, the case lay cold and left investigators scratching their heads as they tried to comprehend what had happened. Who killed Rita Corin? How did the police solve the case? Today's story takes us to Burlington, a city in the state of Vermont in the United States. It possesses a captivating mix of history, culture, and natural beauty. It's located on the eastern shore of Lake Champlain. The city boasts stunning views of the lake and surrounding mountains. Burlington's fascinating history dates back to its founding in 1785, and its vibrant economy is driven by technology, education, healthcare, and tourism. But this mesmerizing city bore witness to a terrible crime that took place on July 20th, 1971, and remained unsolved for the next 52 years. On June 21st, 1947, Mary Eleanor Donahue Corin and Thomas F. Corin of New York City held their precious daughter for the first time and named her Rita Corin. Rita was the first child that the Corin family had welcomed. As time passed, they had 2 more children, and Rita got to welcome her 2 younger siblings. She was blessed with a loving and caring younger brother, Thomas Corin Jr., as well as a beautiful and kind younger sister, Mary Corin. The Corin family was well known and well liked in the area they resided, especially since her father Thomas was the zoning administrator for the community. Growing up, Rita was always a quiet and sweet presence, with a shy demeanor that belied her deep reserves of kindness and intelligence. She excelled academically and completed her graduation from Trinity College. She was always passionate about teaching. She completed her degree in primary education and took graduate courses at the University of Vermont. Rita lived with her family for 24 years until one day she decided to move out. It was the first time she had lived away from them, and she moved into an apartment on 17 Brooks Avenue in Burlington, Vermont, with 3 other roommates. She fulfilled her dream when she became a beloved 2nd grade teacher in Milton Elementary School. All her students loved her, and she made a lasting impact on their lives. One of her students, Jim Rabar, still remembers her 5 decades later for an act of kindness she showed him when he was in the 2nd grade. While acting in a school play, he used a teddy bear as a prop, which he liked a lot, and after the play he asked Rita if he could keep it, and Rita allowed him to do so. Rita was also a talented singer and dancer, as she would often spend her time with her younger sister Mary, tap dancing and singing together. During the summer, Rita worked part-time as a chambermaid at the South Burlington Colonial Motor Inn, where she was known for her hard-working and diligent nature. She was loved by her coworkers and guests alike who were touched by her warmth and sincerity. Can you imagine any reason for such a quiet, kind, and warm-hearted person to be killed so brutally? What could have been the reason behind her murder? On July 20th, 1971, when Beverly, one of the roommates of Rita, came back home, she had no idea that a horrifying scene was waiting for her. Beverly Lamphere returned back late from a date with her boyfriend at 1 a.m. The two other roommates were not staying at the house that night, so it was just her and Rita. As she opened the door, she was immediately hit with the scent of iron, the unmistakable smell of blood. Her eyes adjusted to the darkness and she saw a figure lying on the ground. As she got closer, she realized it was Rita lying partially nude with blood all over her body. Her hair was still in curlers and it looked like she had been preparing for bed when the attack happened. Beverly screamed out for her boyfriend, hoping he could somehow save her friend, but it was already too late. Rita was gone, her life snuffed out in a brutal and senseless act of violence. Beverly's mind raced with questions. Who could do such a thing? Why would someone hurt her dear friend? She immediately called the police as she was very scared and disheartened seeing her friend's demise. The darkness of the night was not comforting, and her mind was racing with thoughts about Rita. She had left her dear friend and roommate just a few hours ago, and Rita had been happy and excited to have the apartment all to herself. The silence of the night was deafening as Beverly and her boyfriend waited for the police to arrive. They couldn't understand why no one had heard anything. No screams, no sound of a struggle. It was like the killer had disappeared into thin air. After a short while, the police arrived at the scene and began the investigation. At first, investigators thought that Rita may have been murdered for money, but Rita's purse containing about $20 was found untouched, so it became clear that a robbery was not the motive. When investigators started to examine the whole apartment, they saw there were blood stains in the kitchen, which indicated that the murderer could possibly have fled from there. After a thorough examination of the crime scene, the body was sent for an autopsy. The brutality of the attack was evident from the moment the chief medical examiner, Lawrence Harris, laid eyes on Rita's lifeless body. Her body was examined carefully, and they found violent bruises that covered her face and head. It was clear that she had fought for her life with everything she had, leaving behind signs of a fierce struggle. But in the end, it was the crushing grip of the killer's hands around her neck that had silenced her forever. As if the physical violence wasn't enough, the killer tried to kill her in the most brutal way possible. Her torn clothes were found discarded under her body, a cruel reminder of the heinous act that had taken place. The details of the assault were too gruesome to imagine, and it was a small comfort that she had not been sexually assaulted. Investigators swarmed the area around 17 Brooks Avenue, searching for any clues that could help solve the brutal murder of beloved teacher and chambermaid Rita Curran. The air was heavy with the weight of the unsolved crime, and residents of the town were on edge, fearful that the killer might still be lurking among them. Investigators went door to door. They also talked and interrogated the people around 17 Brooks Avenue to see if anyone might have seen or heard something out of the ordinary in the hours leading up to the discovery of Rita's body. They urged residents to think back to that fateful night and to come forward with any information that could help bring justice to the Curran family. The investigators combed through hundreds of leads, pursued every potential angle, and examined every piece of evidence they could find. Despite their best efforts, they hit a dead end. They found a single cigarette butt near Rita's lifeless arm, and they hoped it might provide some kind of a clue to her killer's identity. But at the time, DNA technology was not advanced enough to extract a profile, and the cigarette butt yielded no useful information. The killer remained a mystery, hidden in the shadows, leaving the investigators and the community puzzled. One day in 1979, FBI agent John Bassett made a chilling connection. The motel where Curran worked was right next to the infamous Elizabeth Lund home for unwed mothers, the birthplace of none other than notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. As Bassett delved deeper into the case, he noticed uncanny similarities between the crime scene and those of Bundy's known victims. Bundy's modus operandi involved stalking the victims for days or weeks before assaulting them. He broke into his victims' apartments and cased their homes, learning their routines and which doors were unlocked. Rita's sister believed Ted Bundy was responsible for her sister's murder and cited some similarities to his other victims. She emphasized that all of Bundy's victims had long brown hair parted in the middle, which she believed was his motive for revenge against his ex-girlfriend. However, Bundy later stated that his victims were chosen for their youth and attractiveness, and not for specific hair color or style. But after looking into the possible similarities, police found that there were details in this case that did not match Bundy's profile. Burlington Police Chief Kevin Scully stated that Bundy would attack his victims when they were asleep, strangle them with a ligature, and use a weapon to bludgeon them. However, Rita was awake and fought back and was strangled manually with fists. Bundy's crimes were usually planned and involved the use of a weapon in ligature, but Rita's murder seemed impulsive and only involved the use of hands and fists. Before Bundy's execution on January 24, 1989, he denied committing any murders in Vermont. And the Burlington police stated that they had investigated the possibility of his involvement in the Rita Kern case and concluded that Bundy was elsewhere in the country at the time. Now they were left with no other clues that could lead them to the real killer of Rita, and again the case slowly went cold. For decades, the case of Rita Kern's brutal murder remained a mystery to investigators. But in 2014, a tiny, seemingly insignificant piece of evidence became the key that would unlock the case. It was the cigarette butt, carelessly discarded near the victim's body, that had lain forgotten for years. Detectives knew that it was a long shot, but they were able to extract a DNA profile from the cigarette butt and submit it to the National Criminal Database. But unfortunately, no matches were found. It was a puzzling and frustrating dead end. But Detective Lieutenant James Trebb refused to give up. He knew that this DNA profile could be the key to unlocking the case, but he needed to think outside the box. He realized that the person who left that cigarette butt may have never had genetic material entered into the database, possibly because they had never been convicted of a felony. Detective Lieutenant James Trebb refused to let the case of Rita Kern's murder go unsolved. In 2019, he made a bold move and gathered a team of experts to review the evidence, taking a fresh approach to the decades-old case. They combed through every piece of evidence with a fine-tooth comb, determined to find the missing puzzle piece that would crack the case wide open. Trebb knew that they needed a new strategy, and they found it in genetic genealogy. They decided to use this cutting-edge technique to analyze the DNA profile found on the cigarette butt discovered at the scene of the crime. They delved deep into DNA databases, hoping to find a match for the genetic material that had eluded them for so long. Their hard work paid off when an outside expert in genetic genealogy was able to connect the DNA to relatives of a man named William DeRusse. The relative they then contacted was the half-brother of DeRuisse, who was willing to give them his DNA sample, and his DNA helped to finally conclude with certainty that DeRuisse was the one who left behind the cigarette but found at the scene of the crime. When police looked into DeRuisse's whereabouts at the time of the murder, they found he was living 2 floors above Rita's apartment at 17 Brooks Avenue. With this breakthrough, they finally had the key to unlock the mystery of Rita Kern's murder. The investigation proceeded, and investigators now found additional DNA evidence on Kern's ripped housecoat that matched the DNA on the cigarette but found near her body. This discovery strengthened the case against Darius as it linked him to the crime scene in a more concrete manner. They then looked into his past and found out that William DeRusse was married to Michelle in the summer of 1971 in Burlington, just about 2 weeks before the murder. They were newlyweds who were living in the same building just 2 floors above Rita Kern when she was brutally murdered in 1971. Furthermore, investigators were able to re-interview DeRusse's then-wife, who had previously lied about his alibi when they had interviewed her during the initial investigation, and she admitted to her falsehood. She told them that she had been threatened by DeRusse to say that they were together on the night of the murder, but the truth was that they had had an argument, and DeRusse went outside for a walk to try and cool down. She had no idea about what happened when DeRusse was gone. Her admission was a key factor in the investigation as it helped to establish DeRuisse's guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. She also told them that shortly after the crime, DeRuisse had left her and moved to Thailand to become a monk. 3 years later, he resurfaced in San Francisco where he met his second wife, Sarah Hepting. Detectives contacted Sarah, his second wife as well, and asked her about DeRuis. Sarah's account of DeRuis was chilling. She told Burlington police that he once stabbed a woman right in front of her, but luckily she survived the attack. In addition, she revealed that he had tried to strangle her in the same manner that Corin was killed. All of this, along with evidence found against him and the confession of his first wife, was enough for the police to be sure that they had their culprit. But sadly, despite the victory in solving the case, the day was bittersweet for the police, as when they looked into DeRuis, they learned that he had already died of a drug overdose in 1986. The news of the breakthrough in Rita Corin's murder case sent shockwaves through the community, bringing a mix of emotions for those who knew her and those who had only heard of her through stories. For Mary Campbell, Corin's sister, the case had haunted her family for generations. "We now have 2 generations in our family who never knew her," she said with a heavy heart. But through the tears and the pain, there was a glimmer of hope. Thomas Corin, Rita's brother, found solace in the support of his loved ones. "I pray to my parents and I pray to Rita. My wife Nancy tells me we will get through this. We are Corin strong," he said, and his voice was filled with determination. As news of the arrest spread, messages of praise and gratitude poured in from all corners. Former Burlington Police Chief Brandon Del Pozo, who had worked on the case, expressed his admiration for the hardworking detectives who never gave up. "This is one of those cases where I regretted that I couldn't find the killer. But I'm so proud of the Burlington Police Department," he said, and his voice was filled with pride. Jim Rabar, the former student of Corin's, spoke as well, saying, "She was beautiful from the inside out. She told me that I could keep the teddy bear, and I still have the teddy bear. I just can't find it," he said with a heavy heart. Rabar's sentiment was echoed by many in the community who remembered Corin as a dedicated teacher who had a passion for education and helping others learn. Her legacy will continue to live on in the hearts and minds of those who knew her, and those who only know her through the stories that have been passed down through generations. We hope you've enjoyed this gripping story of how this cold case was solved after more than 50 years. The tireless efforts of investigators and the advancements in forensic technology have allowed this case to finally be solved, bringing closure to the loved ones of the victim. Skidmore, Missouri is the setting of this tragic and disturbing story. In the interest of providing a bit of background, it's worth noting that this small town with a population of less than 400 people already had a big name when it came to crime. It became the center of a media firestorm in the early 1980s. A local man named Ken McElroy had a notorious reputation as a vicious bully. Accused of theft and rape amongst other things, he would often receive light sentences for his crimes, which angered the people of Skidmore. When leaving a local bar in 1981, he was shot dead in broad daylight in a vigilante-style execution. Despite his wife witnessing the murder, the town closed ranks and would not corroborate her version of events. And 20 years later, this refusal to talk and a stalled investigation would thrust Skidmore back into the spotlight once again. Branson Kane Perry was born on February 24, 1981. His parents divorced in late 2000, but he remained the apple of their eye and they adored him. He graduated from Nottoway Holt High School and soon after began working odd jobs around the neighborhood to support himself. He was an active young man and a black belt martial artist. After the divorce of his parents, he lived with his father at 304 West Oak Street in Skidmore. April 7, 2001, Perry visited his neighbor, Jason Bierman, and while he was there, he ended up being inadvertently drugged. While under the influence, he stripped naked and ended up having sex with Bierman. It was known that Branson was gay and had had sexual encounters in the past, but he felt embarrassed and upset and he confided in his father, Bob. Bob knew about his son's sexuality, but he was furious that his son had been taken advantage of. For days later, Branson invited a friend called Gina over to his house. Bob had been in hospital and was due home soon. Branson wanted to have the house tidy for him when he returned. At the same time, 2 unnamed men were carrying out repair works on Bob's car outside. The events of that day remain unclear. The following is an excerpt taken from a blog post made by Rebecca Clino, Branson's mother. The events of that day are fairly sketchy to me and often make no sense. I don't have a timeline of when they occurred, only sporadic comments that were made. At one point, the friend saw Branson run into the kitchen and take something out of the cabinets, then run out the back door. When he returned, she said he wouldn't tell her what he was doing and acted like nothing had happened. Later, she said she had taken a shower, and when she came out of the bathroom, she saw one of the men that was working on the car going through the cabinets in the kitchen. She said she had asked him what he was looking for. He told her nothing and went back outside. Then at approximately 3 p.m., she'd been upstairs when she heard the front porch door shut. She looked out the window and saw Branson. She asked him where he was going, and he told her he was going to put the jumper cables into the storage shed and would be right back. She never saw him again. The men that had been working on the car claimed to have never seen him. No one saw him. When Branson didn't return from outside, Gina says that she believed he had simply gotten sidetracked, so she left his house and went home. The next day, April 12th, Branson's grandmother, Joanne, stopped by the Perry residence. When she got to the house, she realized no one was home and that the door was unlocked. Over the next few days, she continued to call the house but would get no answer. She contacted Branson's mother and they realized that neither had spoken to him. Bob was discharged from hospital a few days later than expected, and he and his wife went to report Branson as a missing person on April 17th. County police organized a 15-mile radius search of the area surrounding Branson and Bob's home. They could find no trace of him in the fields or abandoned buildings. Police also couldn't locate the jumper cables he said he was taking to the shed. It wasn't until 2 weeks later that they were found just inside the door. For the following 6 weeks, the police interviewed at least 100 people in Skidmore in an attempt to piece together Branson's movements and generate any new leads. They spoke to his friend Gina, who was one of the last people to see Branson. She told the police that Branson had been experimenting with drugs, namely marijuana and amphetamines. This was confirmed by a member of his family, who said that he had a bottle of Valium with him on the day he disappeared. Following this lead, police began investigating other drug users who were known to Branson, but they all passed polygraph tests when they said they had not seen him. Rumors circulated that Branson was indebted to local drug dealers, but no information surrounding this came to light. Bob's first thought was that he was embarrassed by his encounter with Bierman and as a result had gone to Kansas City to see friends. He also assumed he could have hitchhiked as he didn't have a working car. The investigation into what happened to Branson stalled, and nothing new would arise until 2003. On April 10th of that year, a 59-year-old pastor and scout leader called Jack Wayne Rogers was arrested. Allegations ranged from child pornography and assault to practicing medicine without a license after he removed the genitalia of a trans woman in a hotel room. In a botched gender reassignment operation, after being unable to stop her from bleeding, his victim called 911. While investigating him, they uncovered numerous posts he had made on message boards pertaining to the torture and assault of various men. One of these posts stood out to investigators. In it, he claimed to have been flagged down by a blonde male hitchhiking. He described raping, torturing, and mutilating the young man. He also claimed that the victim had been buried in a secluded area of the Ozarks. Police believed that there was a possible connection to Branson. However, Rogers denied seeing him, let alone knowing him. He said all the posts he had made were part of a fantasy and completely made up. The law enforcement were not convinced. They continued searching Rogers and in his car found a turtle claw necklace, which bore a resemblance to one that Branson had owned. In April 2004, Rogers stood trial and was convicted of assault and performing an illegal surgery, for which he received a sentence of 17 years and 7 years respectively. He also received a 30-year sentence for charges relating to child pornography, which would run concurrently. Whilst he was being sentenced, Branson's mother Rebecca begged and pleaded with him for information on her son's whereabouts. He maintained that he did not know Branson and was not involved in his disappearance. Afterwards, Rebecca said she no longer believed Rogers was involved. She said in a statement, "The police are not completely ruling him out, but now the investigation has turned towards Skidmore again. They have received new leads there. I suppose time has a way of unraveling secrets. I believe someone in that area knows what happened to Branson. In my heart, I don't believe this suspect is responsible. Despite the nightmare I lived through at his sentencing, I am thankful that someone with that much evil will never walk the streets again. Sadly, just 3 years after the disappearance of his son, Bob passed away in 2004. The police and Branson's surviving family refused to give up. 8 years after he vanished, the police received what they referred to as a credible tip that Branson's remains could be in Quitman, Missouri. However, this lead, like all others, would go nowhere. To add to the tragedy, after a long fight with cancer, Rebecca Clino, Branson's mother, passed away in 2011. The Q Center for Missing Persons founder Monica Clayson, who was a personal friend of Rebecca, vowed to carry on the search for Branson and not give up hope. Rebecca was buried alongside an empty plot for Branson, which listed his date of death as April 11, 2001, the day he was last seen alive. Branson's case remains open, and the police and family still hope that one day the questions surrounding Branson's disappearance will be answered. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of Branson Perry, please contact the relevant authorities. Moving on to the next case. CCTV often plays a vital role in investigating crimes. It can help piece together events and be a vital witness when there may be no others. In the age of CCTV, it remains a mystery how some people can seemingly vanish without a trace. With cameras picking up at every move, what happens when a CCTV trail goes cold and an investigation hits a brick wall? This is the story of the disappearance of Trevor Deely. On the 15th of August, 1978, Anne and Michael Deely welcomed their 5th child, a little boy named Trevor. He grew up in County Kildare and soon became an extremely intelligent and career-driven young man. He developed an aptitude for business and technology, and by his early 20s had landed a job in the IT department of the Bank of Ireland Asset Management team. The work Christmas party was scheduled for the December 7, 2000. Drinking began at Copperface Jack's and the Hilton before it carried on to Buck Whaley's nightclub on Lower Leeson Street. 22-year-old Trevor left Buck Whaley's around 3:30 a.m. He walked in the direction of the Renoir complex where he had an apartment on Serpentine Avenue. Around 10 minutes after leaving Buck Whaley's, Trevor arrived at his office and security let him in. He made a cup of tea and spoke to his colleague, Carl, who was on the night shift. Trevor checked his emails and made a schedule of what needed to be done the following day. Due to a heavy storm and a taxi strike, he left at 4:03 a.m. with his umbrella in hand and carried on foot. He rang a friend of his in County Kildare and the friend described the voicemail as, "Hi Glenn, I missed you there. Just on my way home, all going good. I'll talk to you tomorrow." The message was regarded as innocuous by his friend and it was deleted. CCTV footage from the bank showed a man dressed in black that was waiting outside for around 30 minutes before Trevor appeared. When he got there, Trevor and the man engaged in brief conversation, but by the time Trevor left the bank, the man in black had gone. At 4:14 a.m., CCTV captured Trevor walking past what was the AIB Bank on the corner of Bagot Street Bridge and Haddington Road, heading towards his apartment. Around 30 seconds later, a man in black takes the same route. The Gardaí believed that this is the same man that was stood outside the bank and spoke to Trevor. This footage of him at 4:14 a.m. is the last known sighting of him. Due to the heavy partying the night before, Trevor's failure to turn up at work was not considered unusual. His flatmates were away that weekend and did not know he was missing. When Trevor failed to show up on Monday, the alarm was raised. The bank called his family, and after confirming that no one had spoken with him that weekend, he was reported as a missing person. The family's take charge approach drew praise from the Gardaí. Detective Sergeant Michael Fitzgerald, who worked the case from the beginning, said, "His friends and family handed out thousands of leaflets when knocking on doors and put posters up all over Dublin. However, due to the days that had passed from his last known sighting to him being reported missing, vital time and clues had been lost." In the weeks before his disappearance, Trevor had flown to Alaska to meet a girl that he had befriended while she was holidaying in Dublin. 2 Gardaí traveled out to Alaska to talk to her, but this proved to be another dead end. The Garda Sabaqua team scoured the River Dodder and the Grand Canal, but turned up nothing. Trevor's sister Michelle said that she called his phone a few times over the weekend he went missing, and she believes that it rang out. Dr. Philip Perry, a senior research fellow in radio and optical communications laboratory at Dublin City University, said that had Trevor's phone gone into the water, it would have died within seconds. Has since stated that she is not 100% sure it rang. After 16 years and still no trace, the investigation was reopened in December of 2016. In April 2017, the CCTV footage was enhanced and released to the public. The Gardaí said they believe that the man seen following Trevor was the same man from outside the bank. He remains a person of interest, and to date, no one has come forward. In August that same year, the Guardia began searching a secluded area stretching 3 acres of a Dublin suburb, around 5 miles from where Trevor had been seen on the CCTV footage. They had received a tip that Trevor had been murdered that night by a criminal from Crumlin, County Antrim, a criminal that was well known to the Guardia. He was involved in a prostitution and drug gang who operated in the area that Trevor was last seen. The gang had also been investigated in June 1998 for the murder of Sinead Kelly, a young prostitute who'd been stabbed to death on Grand Canal Bank. The informant said that Trevor had crossed paths with his murderer by chance, and it was simply a case of wrong place, wrong time. By September, the search had been called off. Trevor's case remains open and as yet unsolved. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of Trevor Deely, please contact the relevant authorities. Moving on to the next case. The disappearance of Marilyn Bergeron captivated Canada. Born in Quebec in 1983, she was a bright and gifted child with a love for the arts, music, and languages. Her open and inquisitive nature meant she was fascinated by different cultures and ways of life. Her parents described friends that could be a bad influence, and she could sometimes find herself in trouble due to her recklessness. Her passion for the arts meant she graduated with a degree in media arts and technology, and she would eventually move to Montreal in 2005. She was able to use her degree by working as a freelance editor for local stations and worked as a sales assistant in a music store. Her ultimate dream was to become a flight attendant, a job that would show her the world and everything it had to offer. However, this bright and happy young woman would soon become a frightened and paranoid one. In early 2008, she told her family she wanted to return to Quebec City, as she was too frightened and didn't feel safe being in Montreal. February 10, 2010, Marilyn leaves her apartment in Hochelaga, Maisonneuve suddenly, and by the 16th of February, she's moved back home to Quebec City to be with her parents. It became clear to her family that something was deeply wrong. She appeared withdrawn and troubled. Her sister Natalie said that when questioned, Marilyn would refuse to talk and break down in tears. Marilyn denied it was financial woes, drug misuse, or relationship problems. Her mother persisted and asked if someone had assaulted her. When Marilyn went silent, she began to cry. Her mother begged her to seek the help of a psychologist and lift the emotional load that she had been carrying for so long. The day after settling back in with her family, on February 17, 2010, she told her parents she wanted to go for a walk. She wore her black coat and suede boots, took her credit card, and left. At around 11 a.m., she was spotted on CCTV trying to withdraw $60 from an ATM in Loretteville, but her card was declined. The footage shows her repeatedly looking over her shoulder as if on the lookout for something or someone. That afternoon, she went to a coffee shop, Cafe Depot, and paid using her card. The clerk said that she appeared agitated and eager to leave. When Marilyn didn't come home that night, her parents knew something was desperately wrong, and they reported her as a missing person to the police. Investigators traced her card to the ATM and coffee shop, and her parents scoured the city, handing out flyers in a desperate attempt to find their daughter. The story of her disappearance quickly became front-page news. Images of her circulated through different media circuits, and the investigation ramped up. When the police discovered the CCTV of the withdrawn and anxious Marilyn, they initially would not show her parents. They were concerned it would cause them too much unnecessary distress. When her parents eventually watched the footage back, they agreed that she looked helpless. Famed crime reporter Claude Poirier examined the case as part of his TV show Poirier Enquête. When standing at the same ATM, he theorized that she could have been looking at a parked car on the street, which would have been in her line of vision. Further credence is added to this argument when considering that it was a 16-mile trip from her parents' house to the coffee shop. While it was feasible that she walked as she was fit and healthy, her family argue it was more reasonable that she was driven by someone, but to date no one has come forward saying they gave her a lift. The trail quickly went cold and all leads were dead ends. It would be 2 years before any kind of breakthrough. A man got in contact with Claude Poirier saying that Marilyn was in Hawkesbury, Ontario, and that he'd seen her there consistently in the area for over a year. Other locals confirmed this after seeing a photograph of her. They agreed that she had been living there with a man. Marilyn's family became frustrated with the lack of progress surrounding her disappearance. The police had not considered foul play and were treating it as a disappearance and possible suicide. Her family continued making requests to have the Sûreté de Quebec, the SQ, or the Montreal police examine her case. The SQ can investigate across the province and had a formidable reputation, and the Montreal police can investigate in the city from which she fled. The requests of the family to have either force take over her case were rejected, and the family expressed their frustration at a press conference in February 2017. The Quebec City Police responded to the criticism, saying they take the case seriously and have done all they can to keep the family informed with the investigation. The SQ said the spokesperson, "In this case, wherever required, the Sûreté de Quebec offered its full cooperation and support to the Quebec City Police Service." The reward to find their daughter was increased to $30,000 Canadian dollars. Their lawyer, former Justice Minister for the province, Marc Bellemare, expressed disappointment with investigators for refusing to hand over to either the SQ or the Montreal police. He also announced that a tip line had been set up in order to gather any possible leads on Marilyn's whereabouts. The family held another press conference in November that year, where they announced that 43 sightings had been reported to the tip line. Jonathan Gaultier, who had known Marilyn in college, had reconnected with her in 2007 while she was still in Montreal. He spoke with journalists on the 10th of December. He explained that she had become increasingly fearful and reclusive in the 2 months before her disappearance. He said that when he and Marilyn were going to the same party, he was shocked by the sudden change in Marilyn's personality. She was no longer the inquisitive and positive young woman she once was. Instead, she was despondent and listened to her music in the dark. When they got to the party, her mood slightly improved. But after talking with a friend, she quickly became frightened and anxious, as if she'd been reminded of something she wanted to forget. She quickly asked to go home. When they returned to her apartment, her demeanor deteriorated rapidly and she began to cry uncontrollably. Jonathan tried to comfort her, to get her to explain what had happened. He asked if she had been raped or witnessed a murder. She said no, something much worse had happened. He continued to ask her what it was, but she would not say anymore. She said to him, "You can't even begin to imagine what I've been through, Joe." He is quoted as saying, "I tried to get her to say what it was for 3 or 4 hours. I got the impression she did not want to put me in danger."